Welcome back to ThinkTech. Here we are on a Friday afternoon, the closing show of the week. Here we are, where the road leads, with Ted Ralston, who is our host, who joins us by Skype from Tucson. We can do anything from anywhere. You will see. And today, the title of our show is Disaster is Coming Soon to a City Near You. We want to know about that. And then the other subtitle is HARP, that's spelled HARP, is not a musical instrument. Okay, and aside from Ted Ralston, who's going to host this show from Tucson, we have here in the studio in downtown Honolulu, the core of downtown Honolulu, Pioneer Plaza, we have John Cummings and Peter Hirari of the City Department of Emergency Management here in Honolulu. Okay, so you think it's appropriate, Ted, that I turn this over to you? Are you ready? Are you up for it?
I'll take it for a moment, Jay. Just want to thank everybody for coming up on board here. I'm, as you mentioned, in the ThinkTech Hawaii Mountain West studio in Tucson, and next week we'll be broadcasting from the ThinkTech Hawaii a little bit farther west studio in San Francisco. Okay. Anyway, where the road leads, it leads to a disaster near you. On the show Where the Road Leads, we explore the intersection between technology and the quality of life in Hawaii and how that is growing and getting better, and the incredible capabilities and insights and efforts that people bring to the table to make our quality of life and our resilience and our sustainability high. I think it may be unique to Hawaii because of our location and our dependence on the global supply chain and upon each other. This thing that you mentioned called HARP, not the musical instrument, which has a single H. This is the double H HARP, HHARP, Hawaii Hazardous Awareness Resilience Program. And it is Hawaii Hazard Awareness Resilience Program. Very complicated thing to say. Maybe the guys can come up with a simple acronym along the way that everybody can understand. But because of that, we want to get the guys who are directly involved and gals to get some FaceTime, get them on the show frequently, so people out there can understand what HARP is all about and how it benefits them.
Absolutely.
How they can help make it better, how they can participate, and where it came from. I tell you, I've had a year's worth of discussions with General Wong and others where this subject has come up. We had some people on last week from Waimanalo. We had Team Rubicon who'd like to join in. Everybody wants to make this thing work. It's such a neat idea. And it came out of the grassroots, I think, so it's absolutely incredible. And we have guys like Peter here who have military background as well as civil background and understand how these kind of homegrown systems have to occur in order to make us to the resilient, get us to the resilient state we want. So rather than me rolling on here, let's just turn to some of the experts. And Peter, thank you for coming on the show. If you can just outline for us a little bit where the DEM comes into the picture, how you personally got involved here, and the sort of the features of HHARP that people can start to understand out there.
Sure, why not? Hi, my name is Peter Hirari. I'm the Deputy Director, Department of Emergency Management. And on my side here is John Cummings. He's the Public Information Officer, so I'll go ahead and start. We were the old Oahu Civil Defense Agency. For those of you who recall the old days, we still do the same thing, new attitude, a lot of new people there. And essentially, we just address all emergency management issues on behalf of the City and County of Honolulu, whether it's hurricanes, tsunamis, floods. And one of our challenges at the department is always public education. And that's where HARP came in. HARP is definitely, as you said, a grassroots effort, but it's also a team effort amongst all levels of government and with the private sector. And most importantly, of course, as you said, with our communities like Waimanalo, Ewa Beach, Kailua, North Shore. We have all of these grassroots efforts coming up, and we're definitely excited to support them, both at the local level and with our partners at the State Emergency Management Agency, to make sure that HARP gets out into the communities and that it educates everybody. One more person educated is going to be one less person that calls 911 during an emergency and tie up our emergency lines unnecessarily because they lack the education, they lack the awareness of what kind of things hazards can do to them. As far as my personal journey here, I started with the department back in 1998, and I essentially came from the state of Hawaii. I worked for the state for a little while, but before that, I cut my teeth, as you could say, in disasters with the American Red Cross. A young man, 20 some years ago, had asked me to assist in the January 1st, 1988 floods. And that young man is no longer as young anymore. He's sitting next to me. He asked me to volunteer for the American Red Cross. And that's where I started some 20 some years ago, my journey into disaster response and disaster management. Having worked for the Red Cross, I then went to the state briefly and then came here to the old Oahu Civil Defense Agency. And we're now matured into the Department of Emergency Management.
This is serious personal commitment on the part of individuals such as yourself, Peter, and others that you can infect with your enthusiasm to move forward here. And that's quite laudable in the history we've had recently of a greater dependence on government. You're selling less dependence on government, more dependence on ourselves, and that requires us to generate the awareness and the pre-planning and the pre-stocking, the pre-positioning, the RSOI, as you might call it in one of my favorite Army terms, of how to actually move this system forward. So how do we educate the public on what the elements of HARP are that they could start on, say, tomorrow? What could a person listening to this show take away from this and start thinking about in his own personal commitment or his own personal actions tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and punt that question over to John to address the importance of HARP and how people can get prepared.
You know, one of the issues I think all communities face is that when there's a disaster happening, people are thinking about it and they're reacting to it. And once it goes away, people forget about it. You know, life gets in the way, school, kids, taxes, your job. You forget about preparedness. What HARP does is it empowers a community to get together and to build resilience within their own unit, their neighbors, their neighborhood, maybe their valley. As Peter said, we have 5 or 6 communities right now that have embraced it. And it's more than just a program. It's being there every month, planning, preparing, and taking certain aspects like communications, emergency response, a CERT training program, and making that a part of everyday life of that community.
So
I have a question, Ted. Just want to, sort of identify where this fits in this organization fits in this is the Department of Emergency Management within the structures of the community. So we have the public, who should be very interested in this because it's their lives and it's their property. And we have other agencies of government in it. But I wonder, this is maybe like the homeless coordinator in the governor's office, where you have a very small number of people who reach out to a very large number of constituencies, and that's how you get the job done. I'm guessing that's what it is. So you guys don't have a warehouse full of cots and blankets and 5,000 infantrymen ready to go out into the street and keep the civil order. You reach out to other agencies and coordinate them. Is that what happens?
Exactly. So we have at the department, we have a staff of 12, and our staff of 12, essentially, as you said, we coordinate all the services. As you know, the county here, unlike other places in the United States, we're the lowest level of government, so there is no city government below the city and county of Honolulu. So one of our challenges is getting out to the neighborhood level, and the local police officer, the local fire company, and the local fire station, they are the ones that have outreach out to probably the lowest level in the communities, whereas we don't have that effective outreach, and that's where, as you said, HARP comes along. So it's not just the people, and it's not just self-reliance, it's all government agencies, all private entities, big box corporations also stepping in after disaster and doing all the donations that they do. It's everybody. Because we live in such an insular community, being an island, we all become survivors, we all become responders.
So it's like everything else, it's about relationships. So when you say building resilience, it's a matter of calling up the big box store and say, look, we may have some kind of emergency and we need to know that you're on board. When we call you next time, you know, we're going to be asking you to help out, and we want your cooperation.
Right, and it's not even during or after the disaster, it's always before the disaster where we're pre-planning and doing this when the sky is sunny. Exactly as John said, you know, when people least expect the disaster is probably when it's going to come.
Yeah. Sorry, Ted, thank you for letting me ask that question.
Jay, that's excellent. John said something interesting about keeping the idea of potential disaster by even after a disaster has completed and we've cleaned up and gone back to work. So that's a really interesting aspect, because only by doing that can you keep the insight going and keep people looking ahead. And that involves the private sector as well. We all work in the private sector. We all go to school. We all have some relationship outside of disasters. So what kind of activities, exercises, field exercises, tabletops, that kind of thing would be reasonable to think about that does what John is asking? Keep people with their finger in it and understanding how things are changing, how technology enters the mix. How do we keep stirring the pot in the times between disasters?
One of the major initiatives we have is to keep close tabs with the visitor industry. And as you say, it's not just when the disaster is occurring, it's every month we're touching bases with the visitor industry. You know, that's the lifeline of everyone in Hawaii. No matter where you are, no matter who you work for in Hawaii, you are indirectly or maybe directly depending on the visitor industry to survive. And because of that, we keep them in very close partnerships with us. And 90% of the visitor industry is private, but you know, definitely that does not stop us from closely collaborating with them and making sure that they're equally informed, equally educated as us.
That's interesting. And the DEM, of course, is the Oahu County or Honolulu County solution space. There's also the state level under Doug Main and the guys at what we used to call civil defense. I'm not sure what the proper term is for that organization now. But how do you keep swim lanes clear? How do you work rapidly together? How do we think of like Maui supporting Oahu or Oahu supporting Maui in these cases that may go beyond a single island?
You know, as I mentioned, there's the city and county of Honolulu, and there's no city government under us. So that really streamlines our operations, where we have just the 4 counties and the state entity. So there's essentially 5 of us sitting at the table, or since they're on neighbor islands, over the video teleconference. Anytime a disaster threatens, we immediately go up on video teleconference with all of the counties and the state entity, and the state emergency management agency is closely collaborating, making sure we get the support we need at the county level. You know, as people always point out, the county or the locals is going to be the we're going to be the first people to respond, and we're going to be the last people out of the scene when a disaster occurs.
So coordination through awareness of each other, relationship developing, periodic calls once a week, perhaps something like that, where you run a status check on each other. So in that kind of a construct, how do we, that aren't connected with that, how do we become aware of what developments are going on? How can we assist? How can we join in? How can Jay Fidell, for example, sitting to your right, start participating in this mentally and in reality tomorrow?
I'm going to give you a short answer on that, Ted. The first thing I'm going to do, you're not going to be very surprised by this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a short break. We need a break now, gentlemen. Maybe this helps us formulate our answer after. Okay? To my left, Peter Hirari and John Cummings of the Department of Emergency Management with the city. This is Where the Road Leads. The handsome fellow on the Skype is Ted Ralston. He joins us from Tucson. We're talking about disaster coming to a city near you, and also we're making it clear that HARP, HHRP, is not a musical instrument. We'll be right back after this short break.
Aloha, my name is Paul Jackson, better known as PJ, and my local interest is in sports. I have my own sports radio show at KWAI AM 1080 that you can stream live. I also have my own website, pjsportsradio.com, We have live guests in studio, and we talk about discussions and topics that everyone wants to know locally here on the islands. We cover everything from surfing to basketball to whatever's going on locally, sports-wise. We try to do our best and cover the topics in depth as much as we can. Once again, thank you for joining PJ here on Hawaii Sports Update. Mahalo.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Okay, we're back to Where the Road Leads with Ted Ralston joining us. He's our host. He joins us from Tucson by Skype. We're talking about disaster coming soon to a city near you, maybe even Honolulu, with John Cummings and Peter Hirari of the City Department of Energy Management. Suggested before or during the break, Ted, that we structure a scenario here, a case study of a hurricane, for example, that hits Honolulu. You know, I always walk out of my house on a given day, and I look at the weather, I feel the barometer is about 35. I say, it's a beautiful day, one day closer to the next storm. That's what I say. The glass is always half empty, sorry. Anyway, so what happens in the case of this hurricane that hits Honolulu, the next big one? What do we do? What does the Department of Emergency Management do? So can you take them through that, Ted?
Well, let's see, I was going to ask that we look at that from the perspective that Peter and John come from, that they have been practiced in that for quite a bit. But let's take a case of you and me, Jay. Neither of us have actually been on the inside of that kind of a planning activity. So I'd like to know how I can participate in that, what I can turn to for sources of information, and what I can think of providing. And in particular, I'd like to ask what Jay can do, again, to prepare for this next storm arriving to a location near you. So Peter, John, if you will, just take us through the thinking process. We're, say, 10 days away, we start getting weather indications of a storm collecting to the south of us, and it's going to move up on the west side of Oahu, between Oahu and Kauai. What goes through your mind? What communications do you generate? What plans do you draw upon? How does that all work?
Well, up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there's a 140-degree longitude mark. And it's a longitude mark, but it's also kind of a go signal. Any storm systems either develop past towards Hawaii or just before that can be over in a very quick period, anywhere from 3 to 7 days. Not a lot of time to do it. We exercise, we plan at the government level to get the response together, to look at evacuation options, getting people on the shorelines, getting them sheltering. But really the denominator is, and it gets down to the individual and the decisions they make of how they're going to take care of themselves. Unfortunately, a lot of folks wait until the sirens sound to start doing things. Where am I going to get the food? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do with my pets? So it takes a lot more than just reacting once the disaster is here. And a lot of that has to do with planning preparedness at the government level, at the county level, but also at the individual and personal level. Do you have a disaster plan? Have you talked with your family about what you're going to do? We have time right now. We're under blue skies. We have programs like HHARP. We have programs like CERT that you're familiar with. And now is the time to look at those options, talk and plan with your family and friends so you can help each other out when that disaster comes.
So again, the personal commitment to get this thing to the point where resilience is a personal result, or result that benefits the people. Sounds like something that we need to start building into our K through 12 educational process so that the kids growing up, I mean, we all, in my day anyway, we hid under desks whenever the atomic bomb threat was. That's gone. But we ought to think of some other way to generate monthly exercises, we'll say. I'm just guessing a number, but monthly perhaps in the school system or something like that, that is not all at once, but just a little bit at a time, and get people familiar with the fact that we're in a transient and fragile environment by virtue of our location for not only the weather forming the way it does, but also for the supply chain that we depend on.
Definitely.
Any ideas on K through 12?
Yeah, and I think you hit upon it, is that school kids are the best way to go because they're going to be the future. We can teach us old folks, but that's not going to do much for the next and following generations after that. We definitely do need to somehow get curriculum into the school and have it in an impactful way where it becomes almost second nature, like you were talking about the old duck and cover that we used to have, right? Those kind of things. Remember those? And just stop, drop, and roll. Everybody remembers stop, drop, and roll from school kid time. And we do need to figure out some way to do that. Unfortunately, with a hurricane, it's not an instant disaster like catching on fire or an earthquake, so it's hard to institutionalize some immediate action drill to the kids. We're talking days of emergency sheltering, hiding in your house, gathering your supplies. So somehow getting it to the K-12 level, I think, and working with the Department of Education. Department of Education is going to be the key because, they have a full curriculum. Teachers have to take institutional days, and everyone definitely everyone has a need to educate the children, and we need to stand in line and get there and get into the curriculum, definitely.
But I hear you saying it's the children, and I've seen this happen, the children are the way to the parents. The parents may not be so easy to educate as they're busy all the time. But you have the children, in school, you have them locked in, and you can teach them what you want, and they can go and talk to their parents. The other thing that strikes me, though, is that there are two levels of this that you need to educate the community about. One is, what do I do myself? It's the thing about, what do you do when you know a storm is coming? Do you go down to Long's drugstore and buy all the toilet paper? What do you do? Do you fill the bathtub? What do you do? What kind of food should you get? What kind of supplies should you get? How do you treat your own house, your own family to prepare them? Why? Because, and I like confirmation from you guys on this. Why? Because the first thing is not to be a burden on your neighbor. To be self-reliant first. Because if you're not self-reliant, then somebody has to come and help you. And if you can be self-reliant, then the community doesn't have to go to the trouble of helping you.
Which is true. Just some quick numbers. We have the largest population in the state of Hawaii on our island right now. Close to 1 million residents here. If we add our visitors we're over that. And if we look at our resources available just from the county level, we have around 9,000 city employees, about 2,000 police officers, 42 fire stations. We have enough resources on a day-to-day basis to take care of those usual things we have here. But if we have a disaster like a hurricane that is going to impact this island, we're going to have a lot of people needing help, and help is going to be a hard time coming. We saw this in Katrina. And a lot of our folks here now have realized that and developed community groups, as we're seeing, to get the training and do the discussions now of how they can help themselves when that period comes after the disaster strikes till the full response kicks into gear. We just need more groups like that.
What about setting up a kind of mental attitude and approach, to deal with it? I don't think people realize, and I don't know how much you want to teach them about this, that in the case of a bad storm or any disaster, there will be those who die. There'll be those for whom help comes too late. There will be those, think of, for example, if the power goes down, the hospital doesn't have sufficient backup power, there's going to be people dying. And for that matter, the storm, the calamity itself could be of such force and violence that it kills them on the first stroke. Do people understand this? Do they understand this is for keeps? And that their moves may determine whether they live or not.
The tsunami evacuations. You know, Peter and I, everyone in the office was watching during the evacuations, people refusing to leave the shoreline, openly challenging the order to leave. We're not trying to be mean, we're trying to save your life. You know, I guess that's where it's got to get to, but unfortunately, you know, you look at hurricanes, the majority of deaths that are recorded when a hurricane comes are folks that do not evacuate the shoreline and are killed by the storm surge. We tell folks over and over again, we suggest, we order evacuations, but it really is up to the person how they react to that. And hopefully, they take the information and react positively and leave those areas that are in danger and a threat to their life and property.
So when as things happens, like back to our scenario, I guess there's two parts to that too. One is you guys push a button. You know, you activate the plan, whatever it is, which is largely going to be communication from your office to multiple people who will help. That's one thing. The other thing is, I suppose, you have to go out there, or rather you have to respond to changes in circumstance. You know, somebody calls you up,
Right.
you know, and
Right.
says, Peter, you know, the cliff just fell in or something. It was something we didn't necessarily anticipate, and now we have another event that is, you know, more threatening than it was 10 minutes ago. And then you have to put another plan into
Right.
place. I mean, this is, you have to be in a control central kind of thing. And how does that work?
It's essentially what we do is we have the Emergency Operations Center, which is, I guess, the hub of city response. And in our Emergency Operations Center for the city, we have all of our city agencies that respond. We have our private partners, Healthcare Association of Hawaii, taking care of the hospitals, keeping them informed, American Red Cross, addressing the human needs of a disaster, Hawaii Humane Society, which is taking care of pets, and you know they have volunteers that staff the pet sheltering. So all of these people use the Emergency Operations Center, or EOC as we call it, as a focal point to respond. All the information comes into there from the field, from the local cops, from the local firefighters. They're sending information into us, and from there we can respond adequately. The executives, such as the mayor, can get the right information to make the right decisions at the right time.
And what you described, Peter, and thank you very much for adding that to the scenario, is the existing response structure that we've got, the communication structure, the planning, and the response. HARP sits out there ahead of time in a way to educate the public, get public participation, and get public individual commitments to take care of themselves as much as possible and minimize those calls into the EOC, is how I see what's going on here. And it seems to me that one of the things we're taking away from this conversation already is that telling the HARP story in a way that is effective and quick so that people get an idea of what HARP's all about and what their responsibilities are as individuals would be an excellent outcome of discussions we have here. It just goes through my mind is what you mentioned, getting a curriculum going for K through 12, which of course is different at K than it is at 12. But that's a great idea. You could even generate student task teams that address certain issues within various communities and have the school groups develop those awareness sets and those stories. We could find ways that the film school at UH, for example, could use the expressive nature of video and even video games to get people to get a sort of a simulated participation. And another thing came to mind, I don't know if you've seen the posters around these days that are talking about the adverse effects of smoking and the adverse effects of sugary drinks. They're starting to show up at the shopping malls. They're pretty effective. The one I like on the smoking has a picture of like a video game thing, and it says, "You smoke, you die, no reset."
Right.
It's like, it's a done deal. And so I think effective, quick, synoptic pictures like that would be a great thing to inspire somebody to take on. Maybe we could even talk about how that would be, how we can get maybe a grant or something using universities and such. And I'm repeating myself here at this point, but the thought's just developing as we're sitting here. We need to tell the story. I heard the story through my wife, who goes to the Waimanalo HARP meetings, and it was a hard thing for me to grasp onto at first. What's this all about? How does this relate? It's not somebody else's job. And here I was embarrassed to have to say that, but that's how I felt. I've changed my mind. But I bet there's another 99% of that million people we have that are thinking the way I was.
I'm not
So-
embarrassed, though. I have no embarrassment whatsoever to tell you that we have to take a break now. So we have in the studio here John Cummings and Peter Hirari of the Department of Energy Management in the city. And we have our host, Ted Ralston, who joins us by Skype from Tucson. And here we are on Where the Road Leads, and we're talking about disaster management, disaster coming soon to a city near you, maybe our own city. We'll take a short break. When we come back, I'd like to ask you guys this. You know, we're assuming that you will have the ability to communicate and necessary to travel. You know, it's a kind of an in and out thing. You can hear and talk to people in the field, and you can get to the field if you need to. Is that a good assumption? What have you got, you know, to help you for those functions in the case of a disaster? We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevelin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday.
We're live, we're here, we're ThinkTech, it's Friday, wow. So we want to, you know, like close this out proper and leave you with messages. But first, just to say, we're here with John Cummings and Peter Hirari of the Department of Energy Management. Our host is in Tucson, Ted Ralston. We're talking about where the road goes. We're talking about disaster management today. So this is our last, you know, part of the show here. I wonder if you guys could deal with what I was raising before. That is, how do we know that your instructions, your advice, your, you know, your organization, your plan, the steps you need to take in the case of our scenario will be received? How do you know you can, you know, communicate?
We don't. Very simply, we don't. I mean, we sit in the Emergency Operations Center. We send out the responders to execute whatever decisions is made at the executive level with the mayor, and we hope that it works. And we hope that the public will listen simply because it's for their own safety, as John had said earlier. But at the bottom line, we don't know how the common citizen will respond, how they will think or act. And I think sometimes that's what worries me the most when I'm sitting in the Emergency Operations Center. And so that's why we have programs that do so much aggressive outreach like HARP and CERT, the Community Emergency Response Team, to empower people to be able to act, to know, so that they know how to act when that evacuation order comes. Should they even evacuate? Should they remain at home? Should they be taking out their kit? Should they be taking their pets into their house? Those are the kinds of things that people will need to think about, as John had said, long before the disaster, while the sun's still shining, not when the siren's sounding, not when the wind's blowing, not when you're about to drown.
Sounds like a big part of this is to make sure they know who you are. You know, because if they know who you are, that you're handling it, then they're likely to listen.
And, you know, and when nothing is happening like right now, you know, our program that we're big supporters of provides communities the opportunity to get together and plan. But our side of the house, our commitment, our promise as emergency management is to provide subject matter experts and access to plans to help them build their community, become resilient, to survive the hurricane, to get through the next disaster. It's a trade-off. We can provide, you know, the means to do it, but our residents have to provide the people and the engagement to make it happen, and that's all we're asking.
I can only ask one more question, then I'm going to surrender this to Ted. You know, so here we are, and you mentioned before, and I totally understand, you're at the lowest level of government in the hierarchy of government, and that means you're closer to the people, you know, than anybody else. On the other hand, this is like the crime scene investigation, where 5 investigative agencies shows up, and then the question is, who's in charge? So, I mean, without listing them, you might be able to list them quicker than me. You know, you could have a lot of people, a lot of agencies showing up on the scene here, all saying, wait a minute, this is me, this is mine. And you guys, you know, you're the city, stand aside. You know, I'm the Fed, I'm gonna take care of this, or whatever. I don't know if you deal with that or whether you're in touch with those agencies now and you have a system for who is in charge of what when something goes wrong.
Yeah, that's the key to our effective response here in the islands. I think we don't have squabbles between our police and fire service. We don't have the fighting going on between our emergency medical folks and our police and our emergency managers. The fact that we're so insular means that we need to plan even closer together. We all recognize that we're all stuck on this island together. And if we don't get along, who's gonna be sacrificed? The people. And we don't want, nobody wants to see the people being sacrificed because we refuse to work with each other. There's very clear lines of communication, very clear lines of authority here on the islands. FEMA and the state have continuously and nonstop told us that they are in support of the county, who is always going to be the lead. The mayor is always going to be the lead person in the county, who's the lead. So it's very clean for us, very organized, I think. And I think the people need to rest assured that government is going to respond effectively. But the fact that government is not going to be everything, government is not going to be the entire solution.
Yeah. Okay, Ted, back to you.
Yes, I appreciate that, those subtleties of command and control and such we just spoke of. I think that there's a lot more we could talk about in many other programs the rest of this year, maybe once every 6 weeks or something, and have a look at a different subject within the HARP structure. One of the examples, for example, is FEMA. We haven't talked about FEMA at all, but FEMA has a lot to do with the mandating plans and such, and also they're part of the recovery cycle. NDPTC is right down the street from the studio here, where the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center generates training materials, training programs. I think that's something we could talk about, how this all ties together. But what inspires me most is the fact that the HARP concept even exists. That is probably unique and unusual, because it does respect and it does show that the citizens are interested in moving forward. I'd like to find a way that we can tell the HARP story in a simple way, a lot of repetition, such as those posters I mentioned, such as maybe some kind of a video game or video function, and make it part of people's lives, and make it real. And then you get to answer the question that I didn't ask and Jay didn't ask, and when do you turn the response on? And if we could all figure out how to better decide how to turn our own response on and start responding to something before it becomes a problem that covers us, how much better we'll all be, how much sooner we can get back to what we're supposed to be doing anyway, and how little or how less we depend on the government resources to come in and work the problem for us. So I think this is a really fascinating idea, this HARP. It is such a novel idea. I don't think it exists anywhere else. And I hope that we'd have Roger Insay on from Sacramento. He and I will be together, and Margie as well, next week in California at an exercise called JIFIC, Joint Interagency Field Experimentation, where we do a lot of this exact type of experimentation. And maybe we can pull from that some of the items of technology insertion that would be useful to HARP. So again, another subject is technology insertion. How do we manage technology insertion into this domain? Fascinating, many subjects we could talk about, and I'd like to offer that to you, Peter and John, as an output device to get your story out to as many people as we can. And I will obligate myself to see if we can go find some way to create a storytelling function that gets the story out there beyond what's already been done. And as we close the session, as Jay sort of said, it's nice to have our guests to the audience what they would like to have as a takeaway they'd like to have the audience have understood from this show. And I'll start by, since I'm on this thing today, Jay, since I'm not exactly in the studio, I'll say that my takeaway is that this is a responsibility we all have, and we must start accepting that responsibility. And the sooner we accept that responsibility, the better we can be organized and generate our capability. Now, having said that, I have to go home and do that when we get home, because right now, I will say that other than a portable stove and water and things like that. We really haven't got our house organized yet, but that'll change. So Peter and John, if you'd say what you'd like to have the audience take away from this discussion today, what would it be?
I would say that everyone has the opportunity to be a victim, and we need to turn that so that everyone can become a survivor after a storm. Everyone should be prepared, have a kit, have a plan, and keep themselves informed at all times. Sign up for Nixle, www.nixle.com. Nixle is our messaging service that we send out critical messages to, so we definitely want people to sign up for that. John?
I think you just defined the poster. Everybody has an opportunity to be a victim, and everybody has an opportunity to escape that. Something like that. That's the poster. John?
From my point of view, again, is while we're under blue skies, is take the time now to learn about the hazards that can affect you wherever you live. For Hawaii, hurricanes, tsunamis, it could be, something in your neighborhood could affect you. Discuss now, make a plan now, but get the training. All the training we have, our CERT program and our HARP program, that's free. It just requires that you, call us up, ask, coordinate within your community for the HARP program. We have the resources now, and I'm just going to pop this up real quick if anybody wants to. That's our HARP program information there.
Hold it a little higher, please.
Yeah, I like that. How's that there? Like where? Okay. Again, contact our office. We can give you more information on HARP. You might actually be living in a community right now that has an active community program like Eva Beach or Hawaii Kai or Anaheina. We can hook you up with those folks. But again, taking the time now to prepare, plan, and ask those questions, how can I help myself to help others, is going to make all the difference the next time when that disaster does come.
That's fantastic insight, and your enthusiasm and internal personal motivations are showing through, and I really personally enjoy working with you guys very much. And Jay, at this point, I think the Mountain West studio affiliate of ThinkTech Hawaii will close the show. I thank you all very much, Jay, for sitting in as the studio announcer, and Peter and John for coming on from the Department of Emergency Management, and let's look forward to seeing you guys on again at a follow-on program and talk about where we're taking this in our steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good weekend.
Thank you, Ted Ralston. Where the Road Leads, John Cummings and Peter Hirari. And don't forget, everybody, sign up for Nixle, Nixle. That's the first step. It's really easy to do that. It'll get you in touch on your phone. Aloha, everyone. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, John. Thank you, Peter.